Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This is our seventh webinar episode for 2026 Claude AI for Marketing Use Cases Every Marketer Must Know in 2026. I am your host, Jeaning San, the founder of Quiet Marketing. I'm a graduate of Business Administration Marketing Management. I have an experience previously as an HR and Chief Operations Officer at the tech company here in Baguio City. And in March of 2025, I founded Quiet Marketing to provide marketing webinars for marketing students and professionals as well. Welcome to our webinar on Claude AI for Marketing Use Cases Every Marketer Must Know in 2026. So let's dive in. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Claude AI for Marketing webinar. This is the Quiet Marketing live webinar for July 31. And welcome and thank you for being here. So this just a disclaimer, this will not be a demo because 1 hour is not actually enough, but at the end of this webinar I will provide you a link playlist where you can dive deeper on everything Claude and all of the things that you need to learn in terms of using Claude AI. So something I've noticed over the past year is that most marketers who say they've tried Claude actually tried it once, asked it to write a caption, got something decent, close the tab, and that's not actually a bad start, but it's also not what Claude is actually for. So kung gagamitin natin ng Claude just like you're using ChatGPT, then what's the point, no? The tools are only as good as your input. So if you're going to feed these LLMs mediocre prompts and without strategy, expect mediocre outputs as well. So today we're not simply talking about prompts, but the use cases that you can actually build from. So knowing these use cases is already a good foundation, enough for your Claude setup strategy, prompting, and how you can use it as a coworker for all of your marketing tasks. Now, there's a study by McKinsey that found that marketing and sales are among the functions seeing the highest productivity gains from AI, because people learn that AI can actually handle and build their workflow around it, and that's what actually Claude is for. And today that's what we're doing. No, we're not here to talk about prompts, but we're going to look at the full picture of what Claude can do for your marketing so that you can actually decide what to use, what to skip, and where to actually begin. Alright, so today's agenda, we're going to talk about the 10% problem. You're only using 10% of what Claude can actually do for your marketing, right? And then next is we're going to talk about what Claude actually is and the 7 use cases, which are content creation, email marketing, CRM, and data insights. And we also have market research, campaign strategy, social media, multilingual marketing, and how to start with Claude AI. Alright, so let's talk about what Claude actually is. Now, before we get into the use cases, the 7 use cases, there are 7 of them today, and I want to make sure we're all starting from the same place, because what I've noticed, if you ask marketers if they heard of Claude, most of them say yes, but when you actually ask them what it actually is, there's usually a pause. And that pause matters because if you don't understand what a tool is built to do, then we end up using it for the wrong things or using it at the 10% of what it's capable of. So that's what we're going to tackle today, no? So Claude is an AI assistant built by Anthropic. It's a US-based AI research company, and what makes them different from some of the other names that you've heard or some of the other AI tools that you've heard is their specific focus. Okay, they build Claude with an emphasis on accuracy, helpfulness, and something they call safety. Okay, so what that means in practice for marketers is that Claude is designed to be genuinely useful on complex tasks, not just answering a quick questions like what we do on AI overviews, Google AI overviews, or AEO. So not just finishing a sentence, but it's a multi-step thinking for long documents, nuanced instructions. That's where Claude is built to operate. So when people compare it to other AI tools and ask, is it better than ChatGPT or is it better than Gemini? The honest answer is it depends on what you're trying to do. But for marketing work specifically, particularly anything involving long documents, brand consistency, detailed instructions, Claude consistently performs well, and that's what today is all about. Alright, so here's the part that I want you to actually remember from this section or this slide. The thing that makes Claude genuinely different for marketing work more than any specific feature is that it remembers context. When you say remembering context is that most AI tools, they work like a conversation with someone who resets every few messages or every conversation. You tell them your brand is warm and conversational. 3 prompts later, it's writing like a corporate brochure. You paste your tone guide, and the next chat, it's gone, and then you start over. Now, Claude handles differently through something called a context window. So, without getting technical, the context window is the amount of information Claude can hold and actively work inside a conversation. So for Claude, that's enormous. We're talking the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of words, your brand guide, your competitor research, your best performing campaigns, your customer personas. You can all feed it in one go. And you can upload them once into Claude, and Claude holds all of it, and for that entire conversation, whether it's 10 exchanges or 200, it's working with everything you gave it simultaneously. Nothing forgotten and nothing ignored. Okay, and of course, works across formats. When you feed all of your guides, your brand guidelines, your identity to Claude, it can now work across formats, drafts, analyzes, summarizes plans, not just writing a tool, but a thinking co-partner across your full marketing workflow. Okay? Just upload everything at once. It holds all of it. When you set up something called a project, diba? For example, here I can show you. Here, we can see projects and that you can set up everything here. This is what I'm talking about. No? There, I've uploaded a few of the things that Claude needs to know about me. So that's just, basically how we do it. But of course, we're not going to do a demo about this time, no? So when you set up something called the project, which we'll talk about today also, no? With a few of the next slide, Claude carries that context across every conversation you have, not just one session, but every session. So that's what changes the game for marketing. Knowing this, you don't just use Claude for just generating answers, but understanding first how it actually works. Okay? And of course, the more you give Claude, the better it gets. So most people get average results from Claude because they give it average context, no? So you open it like a search engine, you type a quick question, you get a decent answer, you close it up. You're using it like you're using Google search engines, okay? What the research backs up is that Claude's output quality is directly tied to the quality of input that you give it. So context matters. And after that, no, yung report, 2024 McKinsey report, we found that marketing and sales are among the functions seeing the highest productivity gains from AI. It's not just because those teams found a magic prompt, but because they built proper workflows. Okay, so they gave Claude real context, brand guidelines, customer data, campaign history, and Claude had something real to work with. Okay, so that's how you're going to um, set up your Claude. Okay, you begin with feeding it with all of your information. If, for example, you're working with a brand, no, you feed it all of the things that Claude needs to know about your brand so that you can have brand consistency all across your formats, whatever you're working with, be it content creation, email marketing, and all of the things that you need, all the materials that you need to have as a marketer. Okay, and the marketers getting the most from Claude aren't necessarily more technical. They're just more intentional about what they bring into the conversation. So that's the shift, and that's what we're building today. Right, so there are 7 use cases for Claude marketing, and we're going through the 7 specific use cases for Claude, and these aren't theoretical, no, they're drawn from how marketing teams are actually using it, from content creation to email to data analysis to research, strategy to social and global campaigns. Now, for each one, I'm going to tell you what Claude does, why it matters for marketing specifically, and what that looks in practice. So number one, we have content creation. Using Claude to draft, repurpose, and optimize, of course, marketing content creation, blog posts, ads, social media, landing pages. Most marketers spend 60% to 70% of their time on content production, di ba? Especially if you're a social media managers, marami ngayon social media managers, and they know how much time they put into just strategizing or thinking of what content to create, using content calendars, content strategy, no, 60 to 70% of your time is allotted on content production. So Claude doesn't replace the thinking, but it removes the blank page and the repetitive formatting work. So dito ka tutulungan ni AI. And one of the most common things we hear from marketers is that I know what I want to say, I just can't get it started. That's exactly where Claude helps you. You just feed it your topic, your audience, your goal, and it gives you a solid first draft. But of course, there's always the human oversight. So it's just a draft, okay? Not the final product. You still need to polish it. A starting point, that's already 70% of the way there, your way through your work. But here's what most people, or what most marketers or users of Claude miss, is that Claude doesn't just write, it repurposes. One blog post becomes a social post, an email, a video, script, outline, all in one conversation. Same message, different formats, different platforms. For marketers managing multiple channels with limited bandwidth, that's not just useful. That's the difference between showing up consistently and going quiet for 2 weeks. Okay, so imagine, no, this my PowerPoint is created by Claude AI. Before, I needed to at least have 2 weeks of my time just strategizing on my PowerPoint, because it's not just about designing the PowerPoint, it's also about how I'm going to present my UI. But now, with just feeding my brand guidelines at what I want to achieve, if my style is minimalist or modern, then Claude can do it for me, just like what it did now for my presentation. So it's really 70% of my workload. Okay, so Yeah, so there, the first thing for content creation is drafting. Claude can write all of your blog posts, your landing page copy, ad copy, SEO headlines, article outlines, all from a structured brief. Okay, so that's 70% of the way there. So you're editing instead of staring at a blank page. Now, the second is repurposing, and this is one where most people have their real aha moments. You have one strong blog and it can turn into different formats, content formats, no? So same core message, different formats, different platforms, different links, all done in one go. And what used to be 5 separate tasks across different days, what eats up so much of your time is now one conversation that takes maybe 15 minutes or lesser. So, and third, of course, is optimization. This is most beginners don't think to use. And you can take existing content, something you've already published, and ask Claude to improve it, restructure it for SEO, generate 5 different headline options, test different calls to action, suggest a stronger opening paragraph or hooks. And Claude doesn't just create from scratch, it improves what you already have. That's a significant distinction. And of course, the fourth is staying on brand. The one that makes everything else work is your brand consistency. This is what solves the "it doesn't sound like me" problem, because you give Claude examples of your best work and or 3 to 5 pieces that represent how you actually write. Okay, your best blog post, your strongest email, a social post that you're proud of. So you can feed it all in Claude and let it analyze. And these are the patterns. From that point forward, Claude has a reference point to your brand voice. It's not gonna be perfect on the first try, no tool is, but it gets significantly closer, and every time you refine it, it gets sharper, it gets better and sharper. So that's the setup most people skip, and it's the reason most people say Claude doesn't sound like them. Okay, but you stay if you feed it with your brand guidelines, then you'll always achieve that brand consistency, staying on brand on all of your social media content, across all of the social media platforms that you have. So what I want you to take from this section is that I think it applies to everything we're going to cover today, not just the content. Marketers getting the best result from Claude are not using better prompts, they're giving Claude better context. So there's a meaningful difference between those two things. A prompt is a question or a task that you ask. A context is everything that you bring into the room before you ask it. Okay, so your brand guide, your audience personas, your past content, your campaign goals, your customer language, the more of that you give Claude before you start, the better every single output becomes. It doesn't just work on tools but also people. When you hire people for your team, you need to train them, you need to brief them that, oh, this is our brand guidelines, this is how we do it, this is our brand voice, this is our brand style, this is our style guide, and this is what we want to achieve across all of our social media platforms. Okay, alright, so now that you've got the content, it's in your brand voice, it's your purpose across channels, the next question most marketers have is, how do I make sure that the right message reaches the right person? That's where email comes in. Okay, and this is the use case number 2 where I've seen people's eyes go the widest, because most of us are leaving a significant amount of performance on the table with our email. And use case number 2, email marketing and lifecycle campaigns. Content is moving and email is working. Now, the question most marketers avoid asking is any of it actually driving results? Okay? Most of us have the data, we just don't have time to make sense of it. So, something I've realized about email marketing is this: most of us know how it works. The data is clear, email consistently outperforms almost every other channel in terms of ROI, and most marketers know this. And yet most email sequences feel like they were written in a hurry. Generic welcome emails, re-engagement campaigns. They say that, oh, we missed you to everyone. Di ba? Madalas tayo nakakarinig ng ganyan yung mga strategy ng email marketing. Onboarding flows that were set up 2 years ago and nobody's touched since. And it's not that marketers don't care, but because writing good email, truly personalized, well-timed, thoughtful email takes a lot of time, and time is the one thing that nobody has enough of. And that's exactly the gap that Claude closes for us marketers. And if you look at that number here on the screen, 139 higher click rates. That's the difference in click rates between personalized email campaigns and non-personalized ones. So it's not just a small lift, not a 20 or 20% improvement, 139%. And that gap exists because most emails still treats everyone the same. Same subject line, same body copy, same call to action regardless of where someone is in their journey with you. And Claude doesn't close that gap by writing faster, but it closes it by writing with the right context. So when you give Claude your CRM data, your audience segments, your customer language, it doesn't produce generic emails. It produces emails that feel like they were written for that specific person at that specific moment. So that's the shift. Okay, so therefore, places inside email marketing where Claude is genuinely useful. So let me walk through each one. So number one is welcome and onboarding. First impression matters in the email the same way they matter anywhere else, diba? And most welcome emails are an afterthought. A generic thanks for subscribing that gets deleted before it's get finished. No, Claude can write a full onboarding sequence that actually sounds like your brand from the first word, not a template with your name dropped in. So the real sequence that reflects your voice, your values, and what your new subscribers need to hear in the right order. The second one is re-engagement campaigns. You have subscribers who haven't opened an email in 3 months, maybe 6 or so. You know that they exist, and you know that the standard re-engagement email, "We miss you, here's a 10% off," isn't going to cut it for most of them anymore, because that's not the case. But with Claude, they can analyze what those subscribers did engage with before they went quiet or before they went inactive, what they clicked, what they ignored, and it can write re-engagement messaging that's actually based on their behavior. So not just a blanket blast to your whole cold list. And then we have the third, which is the lifecycle campaigns: retention, upsell, and win back. So these are the campaigns that most marketers know they should have. Okay, and most don't have properly set up because building them from scratch feels like a project. No, that's how I actually feel when I started doing marketing, when we don't have AIs yet. So it really took a lot of my time just making the perfect draft of a campaign, an email campaign. So Claude doesn't replace that strategic thinking of yours, but it removes the production barrier. No, you tell it the stage, the goal, the segment, and it builds the sequence. And your job is now to review, you refine, and then you ship. Okay, and then of course we have diagnosing and improvement. The fourth is the most underused, and it's the one that I want you to sit with, or I want you to remember. Diagnosis. You can take an email sequence that isn't performing. Open rates are flat, click rates are low, you don't know why. You give it to Claude, ask it to read through and the whole sequence, and Claude can tell you what's wrong. It will analyze the pacing, the subject lines, what's wrong with the content, the copy, the calls to action, the sequence structure, and it will give you a specific actionable breakdown of what to change and why should you have to change it. So it's not just a copywriting tool, it's your thinking partner with no ego about your work. No, because sometimes when we do our work we have that ego in us, because that's just very human of us, diba? Now if you look at the Claude output here on our screen, what you're seeing is a three-part welcome sequence. For example, it's no for quiet marketing. Email 1 goes out immediately, so there's no big pitch, no overwhelming list of benefits, just a warm, honest introduction. Here's who I am, here's what to expect, here's why it's worth your time. So that's the first email. Now, email 2 goes out on a day, and what it says is it delivers something useful before it asks for anything. So the sequencing matters for your email marketing, no? The sequencing matters more than most people realize, or most marketers realize. Okay? And of course, email number 3, or the email sequence part 3, what's the biggest thing you're trying to figure out in your marketing right now? Hit reply, I read everything. So this email will have a reply rate most marketers only dream about, because it's not performing, it's actually listening. No? And that tone, that kind of approach is something that Claude can sustain across your entire sequence when you give it the right context about who your audience is and what they actually need. Okay, so you can give Claude your struggling email sequence and ask it to diagnose why it's underperforming. It reads everything, it identifies what's wrong, it tells you specifically what to change. And don't think of Claude as just a text generator, no, but a thinking partner, one that reads your whole sequence, has no attachment to what you've already written, and will tell you the truth about it. Alright, so now content is moving, email is working. Now the next question for us marketers we avoid asking is any of it actually driving results? So most of us have data, we just don't have time to make sense of it. And use case 3 is where Claude becomes your data analysis. So here's what I've noticed about marketing data. Most marketers have more of it than they know what to do with. So we have the open rates, click rates, lead scores, campaign attribution, CRM exports. It's all there. Okay, so if you don't know what that means, if you're as a student, you can always check those terms. But extracting meaning from it, no, the data analysis itself it takes time and often skills that aren't in every marketer's toolkit. Now, we understand that not every marketer are good with data analysis or data insights. But with Claude, that changes everything. Not just replacing analysis, but by making it accessible. So we're going to talk about each, no, in plain language. So you export your data, you paste it in, you ask questions in plain language. No SQLs, no formulas, no waiting on a data analyst. Okay, just Claude performing everything for your marketing. Now, we have number one is which campaigns drove the most qualified leads last quarter. So ask Claude. It reads your data, identifies your top performers, and tells you why. Again, in plain language, you can act on it immediately. And also, audience segments. You can ask Claude which audience segment has the lowest retention rate. It resurfaces the segment, show you the pattern, and flags what to look at next. So work that used to take hours, it's done in minutes. And next is pattern recognition. Ask Claude what pattern do you see in deals that closed. This is where it gets actually interesting, is that Claude doesn't just count, it connects. It finds the thread across your data that you wouldn't have spotted manually because you were too close to it. Okay? And then of course, creative fatigue. You can ask Claude which creative is showing fatigue this month, and it looks at your performance data across campaigns and flags what's losing steam before you waste more budget on it. No, especially for marketers doing ads. And that's a kind of insight that usually lives in weekly agency report you pay a lot for. Okay, so how relieving for marketers, Claude doing everything for you, for your work, but of course, again, always the human oversight. That's your our role in working with these tools. Okay, so if you look at the Claude output on the right, a real CSV with 847 rows of campaign data, one question asked, and Claude can identify the top campaigns, the best performing segments, the underperforming paid social spend, and gave you 3 specific recommendations at the end. So there's no pivot table, no formula, just a plain language question and clear answer for you. Right? So you don't need SQLs, you don't need an analyst for this. You just need to know what questions to ask Claude, and Claude can do the rest for your marketing workflow. So there, with CRM and marketing data insights. Okay, so now that we know what's working and what's not, the next question is, how do you actually know your customer well enough so that you can market to them properly? Okay, so most marketers think that they do until they look at the data and Claude surfaces from the words their customers actually use. And for use case 4, we have market research. If you think about it, no, the best marketing copy doesn't actually come from marketers. It comes from customers and the way someone describes their problem in a review. So the phrase they use in a support ticket, the exact words in a survey, that language is a gold mine. And most of the time, it's sitting in a folder somewhere, but you haven't read. Okay? So, if you feed Claude that raw data, qualitative data that you have, like customer reviews, survey responses, support tickets, interview transcripts, and social comments, na Claude reads all of it. Okay? connects the patterns, and surfaces what you would have missed because you were too close to it. Okay? So, what Claude gives you are number one, pain point themes. Claude can now identify the top recurring pain points across hundreds of responses. Not just the word count, but an actual insight, and it tells you what people keep coming back to and what that means for your messaging. Next is exact customer language. Okay? This is the one that changes how you write your copy. Claude can now pull the exact phrases that your customers use. Their words, the ones that should be in your headlines, in your emails, in your landing pages. Because when people read their own language in your marketing, they feel understood. And that's what converts. Okay? Customer personas. Claude takes those insights and builds detailed customer personas from them. Not just generic template, a persona based on what your actual customer said in their own words. So that's the foundation for every campaign that follows. Now, we also have competitor messaging gaps. You can ask Claude to surface what your competitors' customers are complaining about. Is it about the same process, their reviews, their language, what they wish existed that you could provide? That's your campaign angle. Okay, and of course, campaign ideas from real words of your customers. Okay, now if you look at the output on the right, when we ask Claude or you input your customer reviews with 248 entries and ask Claude the top pain points, there are three dominant themes resurfacing. Okay, each one with the exact quote used in your copy. And of course, it adds a complete persona at the bottom, built entirely from what customers actually said. Okay? That research used to take days, diba? With Claude, it took minutes. And of course, the best marketing copy comes from your customers, your customers' language. Claude finds the language they already use so that you can use it back. That's one of the use cases Claude in terms of market research. Alright, now moving on to campaign strategy and planning. Most people use AI after the strategy is already decided. They've got a brief, they've got the campaign, now they need the copy. There's a layer before that where Claude is incredibly useful and most beginners never find it. That is the planning stage. Okay, so what I've noticed about how marketing strategies get built is most of them live in one person's head. So there's no structured brief, no documented rationale, no one to push back on the idea before it launches. And so the weaknesses, the things that could have been fixed in 10 minutes, get discovered after the campaign is already live. But Claude changes that. So that's the old way, no? There's no strategy and planning. Okay? So when your campaign goes live, dun palang lalabas yung mga problems. Or dun mo palang makikita. Claude changes that. Claude gives your product, your audience, your goal. It builds a full campaign brief, channel plan, core messaging, audience segmentation, not a template, but a structured document that you can actually hand to your team. And devil's advocate. Okay? This is the one most people don't think to use. You can actually ask Claude to poke holes in your strategy. What's the weakness weakest part of this campaign? What are we assuming that might not be true? Where could this campaign fail? So questions like that, no? It has no ego about your idea, no attachment to what you've already decided. Because sometimes that's what marketers are. We always decide on our emotions because we're human. And with Claude, it has no ego. It will tell you what's wrong before your audience does. Okay? Audience segments suggested from data. Instead of assuming who your audience is, ask Claude to suggest segments based on actual data. Okay? Feed it your CRM exports. Okay? If you're using CRM tools, so your past campaigns results, your customer reviews, it identifies which segments make the most sense to target and why. Okay, A/B testing, A/B planning, A/B test and A/B planning. Before launching a single ad, you can ask Claude to map your A/B test variations, which headline angles to test, which CTAs to compare, which audience splits to run. So you go into your campaign with a plan, not just a guessing game. Okay? And of course, multi-channel strategy across all of your platforms that you're using. Okay? End to end. So here, this is a brief example of our live output via Claude. So it gives you the goal, the core messaging, channel plans, and of course, it could be your devil's advocate. It's listed here. And the good thing about Claude is it gives you a great UI, which is great for structuring all of these, no, your marketing work. Okay, now of course strategy is done, brief is built. Now how do you make sure that the content from that strategy shows up consistently across every channel, so without spending 5 extra hours a week reformatting everything? So that's use case number 6. Okay, social media and content repurposing. Okay, so here's what we commonly see, no, from most marketers. They have one strong piece of content. It could be a blog post, it could be a LinkedIn post, a long form, a webinar, a podcast episode. They know it should become a LinkedIn post because we're talking about repurposing, content repurposing. They know it should become a LinkedIn post, tweets, an email, an Instagram post, a YouTube perhaps. They don't just have the 3 hours it takes to do it properly. Kasi for others, no, for others, depending on their pace, sometimes it took for them to do a LinkedIn post for one day. Now with Claude, just one input, one conversation, everything else follow. It creates you. Claude gives you your full blog, your transcript, your talking points. You just need to tell it your brand voice, your tone, your platform rules, and it generates every format, each one adapted for where it's going to live. Okay, be it LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, across all of the social media channels that you're using for your brand. So this is the part most people miss, is that Claude doesn't just cut your content shorter, it rewrites it for the platform. Whether it's on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, YouTube, be it also TikTok. Okay, for LinkedIn, that's one thing to have depth and a strong hook. For Twitter, with wanting precision and punch. Instagram wants warmth and relatability. Email for your newsletters, summary ready to send. So Also, no, with volume without fatigue. Ito rin na ang ibibigay sa atin ni Claude. If you have 5 LinkedIn posts, you can do it in one go. You can write 10 tweets. It also, for example, here, Claude created a calendar. Here's how it actually looks. Content calendar for my entire June post. So, yan. Tapos na ang trabaho mo for a whole month's worth of content. Okay? Going back, no? Your content calendar backbone. Yan. Just take that output and you have a backbone of your content calendar. One strong piece of content per week. Yun nga, yung pinakita ko sa inyo, it's a whole month's worth. It fills your social schedule without you starting from scratch every day. So that's the system most consistent marketers are running. Claude makes it accessible. And if you look at the output at the right, a Facebook post is reflective and story-led. The tweet is tight and direct. An Instagram caption that is personal and inviting. Same message, 3 tones, 1 conversation. It's not just a copy-paste, but that's a genuine adaptation. Okay? Consistency that doesn't require more time, but it requires a better system with one input, but every other platform is done for you. Okay, so yeah, that's social media and content repurposing, which Claude can help us for. Now let's go to use case 7, or the multilingual marketing and global reach. I want you to flag something before we get into it, because that even if you're running a global brand today, this one matters, okay? Because the marketing landscape is shifting. As we always say, more businesses are expanding into new markets. More freelancers are working with international clients. And for Filipino marketers, especially, the ability to move between markets is becoming really competitive edge. Your competitive edge as a marketers. And the most important thing to understand about this use case is that there's a difference between translation and localization. Translation gives you the words, but localization gives you the meaning. And in marketing, meaning is everything. Okay, so what standard translation gets wrong? When you're marketing copy through a translation tools, you get a technically correct version, but it loses the tone, okay? The nuance, okay? The cultural context that makes people feel like you're talking to them. And of course, the generic translation. The generic translation doesn't convert because it doesn't feel personal. And the marketing that doesn't feel personal, often it gets ignored. Okay, so what Claude does differently, okay, is it translates the meaning. When you ask Claude to localize your content, you give it more context. You tell it the audience, the market, the cultural context, and your brand voice. And Claude adapts the meaning, okay, not just the words. It checks if your references land. It adjusts the register, whether it be formal or informal, depending on the market. It keeps your brand voice intact across the language shift. And specifically for anyone here who markets in the Philippines, The ability to move fluidly between Filipino, English, and other regional languages and maintain brand consistency across all of um, all of them. It's a skill most global brands struggle with. And Claude gives you that capability. You can write your campaigns in English, localize it in Tagalog, or even adopt it for another market, all maintaining the same quality of your voice, the same strategic intent. And that's not only useful for a freelancer or a small agency, that's actually a differentiator. And it's not just campaign copy. It's not just email subject lines, product descriptions, customer support scripts, social post landing pages. Any written marketing asset can be localized properly, not just translated with Claude. Okay, so that's the scope of what this opens up for us. So if you look at the output on the right, one English tagline, two localization. The Tagalog version didn't just translate the words, it used kumpiyansa because Filipino audiences respond to empowerment framing. It kept the rhythm of conversational Tagalog. Okay? And the Latin American Spanish version. Okay? Because Latin American digital audiences prefer the approachable register. So those aren't translation decision, those are cultural marketing decisions. Claude made them because we gave it the context to work from. Okay, so translation tools translate words, but Claude it translate meaning. Okay, so that's the distinction, the difference between a campaign that's understood and one that actually lands. So those are the 7 use cases: content, email, data, research, strategy, social, and global. 7 different ways Claude can work inside your marketing, starting from wherever you are right now. Before we close, I want to leave you with one clear question, no? Most of you are sitting with, where do you actually start? So the 7 use cases, that's actually a lot. Some of you might think. So you don't actually need all of the 7 on day 1. In fact, trying to use all of them at once is the fastest way to use none of them well. So the only question you need to answer right now is, where do you feel most friction in your current marketing workflow? And then you start with that. Not the most interesting use case, but the most painful one. Okay, the thing that takes too long for you to work on. So the thing that feels inconsistent for you. No, the thing that keep putting off because the production cost is too high. Okay, so that's your starting point. If you're spending too much time writing from scratch, starting with content creation, if your email sequence feel generic or inconsistent, start with email marketing. If you have campaign data sitting in a spreadsheet you never properly analyze, then start with CRM and data insights. If you haven't read your customers' reviews in months, start with market research. And if you're planning campaigns alone without anyone to pressure test your ideas with, no, start with campaign strategy. And if you're behind on content across too many platforms, then you have social media. If there's a market that you've wanted to reach but haven't because of that language gap, then start with multilingual marketing. So you just pick one and use it consistently until it becomes part of how you work, and then add the next layer. Okay, so the principle or the gist of this webinar is that the marketers who get the most from Claude aren't the ones who use it for everything. They're the ones who use it consistently for one thing and build from there. So that's not just a shortcut, that's actually how systems get built. And I want to close with something that I think gets lost in most AI conversation is that AI doesn't change marketing overnight naman. It changes how you show up to your marketing every day. And the compound effect of that over weeks, over months, is what actually makes the difference. No? And there are three things that you need to remember is you add small. So just pick one use case, use it until it becomes natural. Don't try to overhaul everything at once. Add one layer when the one first feels effortless, then you add the next. That's how sustainable systems get built, not in one week and over time. And then you keep learning. Marketing is changing. Claude is changing. The marketers who stay curious, who keep asking why, who keep looking for the bigger picture, are the ones who stay relevant. So that's always been true. AI just make it more urgent. Okay, so with quiet marketing, no, I started quiet marketing because I believe that there's more than one way to build authority, and you don't have to always be the loudest in the room. You don't have to post every day. You don't have to perform. You just have to understand your market deeply and show up for them with clarity. And Claude is a tool that supports that kind of work. So it's not a replacement for thinking, but it's a multiplier for the thinking that you're already doing. So thank you so much for spending this hour with me. I hope that marketing feels a little less overwhelming than it did when we started. If there's one thing that I want you to take from today is that you don't have to figure this out alone, and you don't have to figure it out all at once. Start where you are, use what you have, and you build from there. That's quiet marketing. And if today was useful, I hope that you share this with one person who needs to hear it. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. And I hope that you share this with anyone who needs this if you found this valuable. Of course, please do check the evaluation form I sent in the email. After that, you'll be receiving your certificates within an hour after this. And of course, we still do have our marketing webinar bundle if you need marketing webinars for your school requirements or anything marketing related. You can always check our Google form. It's in the comment section. So I hope that you check on that. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. I'll see you again on the next one. If you want to know about more about our upcoming marketing webinar topics, you can always revisit our Google Forms for all of our marketing webinar details. And of course, please do like our social media pages. We have our Facebook page, our Instagram, and of course, you can follow us on YouTube as well. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We always provide marketing webinars every end of the month. So thank you so much for being here. Once again, this is Jeannie San saying adios. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the night. Bye!